Hello, everybody, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi, your spoiler-free place for Star Wars discussion, analysis, and rhetoric. Today is one of my favorite times of the year because this is when I get to showcase my amazing mythology students from both second hour and sixth hour here at the high school where I teach, Washington High School. And we have some great stuff for you, just like we did last year. They have created 5 to 6 minute segments where they're going to pick a topic from Star Wars, from our study of Star Wars in mythology. It is the culmination of what we have done the entire semester, in which they look at comparative mythologies from Greek, Egyptian, and Norse, and talk about culture and heroism and what they notice from studying the movies. And this is great because for some of them, this is the first time they have experienced the Star Wars universe. And I am so proud of the work they have done. I'm going to get out of the way so I can bring in these amazing students. Here is part 1 featuring my second hour mythology students.
This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
Hi, welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. I'm your host, Mary L. Here with me today are your co-hosts, Jackson and Gabe.
Hey, this is Jackson.
And this is Gabe.
Today we're going to be talking about Kylo Ren, his developments, motivations, and parallels to Darth Vader.
All right, so for our first section, we'll be talking about Kylo Ren's development over the course of the 2 movies. To start us off, we'll talk about some of the physical changes that correlate with his mental changes. The first example is his helmet. In Episode 7, we see him as this mysterious, powerful Sith with a dangerous, angry streak, but after he takes off his helmet for the first time when he interrogates Rey, we see his true face, both mentally and physically. He becomes more human, and we can really begin to see his struggle between light and dark. This example is shown even more in Episode 8 after Snoke calls him a child in a mask. He destroys his mask after that, and almost like he's coming out of his shell. And he begins to become more confident, less torn between the light and dark until he finally settles after killing Snoke.
Speaking of physical development, it can also be seen through his scar after the final battle in Episode 7. Representing his physical and mental growth, the healing of his facial scar reveals his slow progression from killing his father at the end of Episode 7. He's still wounded, though he doesn't want to admit it, and continues to be haunted by the fact that he killed his own father in cold blood for his own personal gain. He refuses to reveal these internal feelings, but his outward appearance gives it away. However, near the end of Episode 8, his scar fades for the most part, showing his resolve to join the dark side and move away from his father's death.
Speaking of internal conflicts, when Rey is starting to connect with Kylo and learn more about him and his past, I think she starts to sway towards Kylo's side a little bit. Unfortunately, we see this fail once and Kylo kills Snoke. She believes he's fully turned to the light, but in his own mind, he resolved to rule the First Order. However, we do see this one last moment of conflict when he comes to face with Luke, and he is reminded once again of his past.
I agree. We can see little moments where Kylo is conflicted, but in the end, he turns to the dark side, wanting Rey to join him instead of him joining her.
Yeah, but sadly, that final moment of conflict ends with him choosing to kill Luke, though of course it doesn't work since Luke is still on Ashto. However, the strike was still made, and with it we can see Kylo finally turn to the dark.
Exactly. It might be interesting to shift the topic of conversation to the source of his power complex. Unfortunately, I think a lot of this turmoil comes from his feeling of abandonment. Yes, Leia and Han felt that Luke would be able to hone his Skywalker blood and abilities, but leaving him with his uncle manifested a feeling of intense loneliness within him, which evolved into the chaotic individual we see during the third trilogy. Building on that, we can see he's desperate to forget about his past and cut himself off entirely from what might connect him to the light. This resolve to follow the darkness, he believes, is the only way to truly channel his emotions and process all of this anger and hurt.
Luke Luke almost kills Kylo, so Kylo feels betrayed as if he has no one to trust. It then motivates him to want to be more powerful and to seek the dark side, to become like Vader. He feels he needs to kill Luke in order to move on from his past, and that motivates him to find Luke at all costs.
It's interesting to see the way he copes with this side of himself. In many ways, Kylo tries to emulate his grandfather, and he's even similar in ways he might not have intended.
There's the mask, the distorted voice, the dark cloak, and the red saber. I feel like a lot of it has to do with his desire to be like Vader and how he wants to have the power that he did.
Not only that, but he's constantly trying to, quote, finish what he started. He relies heavily on the Vader facade for the intimidation factor, and it seems to work well enough. Everybody's terrified of him.
There is one big way that Kylo departs from Vader's character, and that's the fact that Kylo actually succeeds where Vader failed. In Episode 3, we see Anakin say that he wants to be Emperor, but in the end, he was no match for Sidious's extremely deep knowledge of the Force. So instead, he became Sidious's right-hand man during his reign of the Empire. On the other hand, Kylo actually winds up becoming the Master. In the end, something Vader could never do. Though, even with this major departure, we do see one final similarity to Vader in that he wants someone to rule with.
Oh yeah, near the end of Episode 3, we see Anakin plead with Padme to join him and be his Empress. She ultimately refuses, just like how Kylo asked Rey to rule the First Order with him. And just like Padme, Rey winds up refusing, trying to pull Kylo back to the light. But his mind was already made up.
Thanks for listening, everybody. This has been Mary, Gabe, and Jackson. Now we'll go ahead and hand over the mic to the next group.
Hello, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. I am your host for this group, Luca Baleri, and with me today is...
Brendan Nye,
David Yoakum,
Alex Scudder,
Gage Hartman.
Today we are going to be talking about the light versus dark side character comparisons in the movie The Last Jedi. We're going to be talking about Kylo Ren and Rey, and we're going to later talking about Snoke and Luke. So to start off the movie, we're going to talk about similarities between Kylo Ren and Rey. Brendan, what do you think about this?
Yes, Kylo Ren and Rey are very similar in terms of the Force. In fact, they're actually able to connect through the Force because of Snoke and are able to see each other. And another similarity is how they were both trained by Luke Skywalker. Luke trained Kylo when he was younger, but now he's hesitant of training Rey because he fears that she will turn out like Kylo.
I agree with you, although it was Snoke connecting the minds of Kylo Ren and Rey, the fact that they were still able to see each other and feel each other in the Force is impressive on both parts of Rey and Kylo, saying how powerful they are as Force users. Next, we're going to talk about how different the two are in the Force, along with their attitudes of the Force.
So I think some of the key differences between Kylo and Rey is how Rey throughout the entire movie is trying to have and find her parents, and she wants to know what happened and why they left her. And Kylo is trying to separate himself from his family, and he doesn't want anything to do with his past. And then another difference is how Kylo is more unstable than Rey, and he can't control his anger and emotions as well, and it always cripples him rather than helps him. But Rey is also more calm and collective on the other hand, and she thinks about her decisions way more before doing them.
I really agree with that statement. I really like how the two characters are basically polar opposites throughout the movie, even though they both kind of go through an almost like a questioning arc of themselves, like, is this side of the Force right for me? Like, should I go to the opposite side? But in the end, they are reaffirmed in each side of the Force. So next we're going to be talking about Luke versus Snoke. We're going to talk about how some of the few similarities they have in the movie.
Well, the first similarity is that they're both incredibly strong, knowledgeable, and capable users of the Force. And they're also both mentor figures. Luke's a mentor for Rey, and Snoke's a mentor for Kylo Ren. They're both also skilled at using the Force to manipulate minds. Luke did it to Kylo, and Snoke did it to both Rey and Luke. and they're both like very inspirational to those around him. Before they even found Luke, everybody looked at him as a legend and an inspiration, and the rebels look at Luke like he's a legend versus the First Order who like want his downfall and want to find him just to kill him. Snoke is extremely powerful, and he makes his allies worship him based on their fear. Overall, they're both very powerful and inspirational to those around him.
I agree with most of that. I just don't think that manipulation is the correct word when we're talking about how Luke projected himself using the Force to distract Kylo. I think a distraction is more the word that is correct for that, because he didn't really manipulate Kylo's mind like Snoke did to Rey in the movie. So now that we're past that, we're going to be talking about the more obvious differences between Snoke and Luke in the movie.
Well, there's a lot of differences between Luke and Snoke, but one of the key differences is the way that they use the Force. Luke, of course, uses the light side of the Force versus Snoke using the dark side. Snoke shows his power of the dark side by stalking Rey and Kylo's conversation through the use of the Force. Luke uses the Force to make a holograph of himself on the other side of the universe, showing how powerful his Force is. Another difference is the actual connection that they have to the Force. Also, another way that they are different is their attitudes. Luke is quiet and concealed versus Snoke being very assertive and dominant over the First Order.
Continuing on with the connection they both have to the Force, in The Last Jedi, we are shown at the beginning that Luke actually had cut himself off from the Force after the failure he had experienced with Kylo Ren, and it took after convincing from Rey to join the fight and how he realized the Resistance is in need of his help, that he finally reestablishes that connection, and he uses it to project himself instead of bridging two people's minds like Snoke did, which is another great similarity between the two. So that's going to be all the time we have for our segment today. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy listening to the next group as you've enjoyed listening to us.
Hi, welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. I am your host, Clay. Here with me today are your co-hosts, Javon.
Hi, everyone.
And Kenny.
Hey, guys.
Today we will be talking about Finn's character development in Star Wars The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi.
We chose to talk about how Finn changes throughout the course of these two films because when he is first seen, he is running from the Resistance and the First Order, and then eventually tries to sacrifice himself in order to save the Resistance.
Adding to what Kenny said, he made friendships with people in the Resistance and learned what hope is.
Finn first realized that what the First Order was doing is wrong when he was ordered to kill innocent people on Jakku. When Finn sees the devastation from what his fellow stormtroopers did, he feared the First Order and started to disagree with the actions of what they were doing.
When Finn and his squadron get back on the destroyer they were on, he takes his helmet off and is spotted by Captain Phasma. He is then made to report to Captain Phasma for inspection. She finds nothing wrong with him.
Finn seizes his opportunity to escape with Poe when he tells the other stormtroopers that the prisoner needs to be transported somewhere else on the ship. At this point, Finn simply needs a pilot to get off of the First Order ship, and Poe is his best bet at finding another person that wants off of the ship as much as he does.
Poe and Finn start to bond while on the TIE fighter leaving the destroyer. The experience of escaping together started one of Finn's friendships that will help him through his time in the Resistance.
Now we're going to jump to how Finn acts during his encounter with Maz Kanata. At this point, Finn is scared and wants to run from the First Order. He thinks the Resistance has no chance winning the battle.
Shortly after Maz Kanata saying that she knows Finn just wants to run, the First Order shows up and Finn is forced to defend himself from the First Order. He could have just given up and turned himself back into his captain.
Finn also exemplifies a friendship that he has made with his reaction to Rey being taken by Kylo Ren. When talking to Han Solo, he panics and starts to worry about what will happen to Rey while she is gone.
This is another example of friendships that he has developed on his journey. He also sees more bloodshed that the First Order causes, and he dislikes their actions even more.
Finn is brought to the Resistance base after the battle with what is left of the Resistance. While discussing how to destroy the Starkiller base, Finn volunteers to go onto the base and help disable the shield since he used to work on it. Finn's act of bravery is an example of how he has changed on his journey. Before, he was just trying to distance himself from the Resistance and the First Order as much as possible. Now he is becoming a hero for what he is doing.
After the destruction of the Oscillator on the Starkiller base, Finn stands alone and fights Kylo Ren. Although Finn is defeated and very nearly killed, his actions are like none other. With no training on how to use a lightsaber in any way at all, Finn stands up to Kylo Ren, who has some training with a lightsaber and the Force.
Now moving on to how Finn changes in The Last Jedi. One of the first things Finn does is try to run from the Resistance in an escape pod. He is scared of the power he has seen in the First Order.
Finn is stunned by Rose, a mechanic on the Resistance cruiser. While taking Finn to the brig, they discuss a plan on how to escape the First Order ship that is chasing them.
Finn's plan involves him and Rose to get onto the First Order destroyer that is chasing them. However, before they can do that, they need to find a code breaker to sneak them onto the ship. Even the smallest chance gives Finn hope that the Resistance can win the fight.
Finn then volunteers for a mission that is not foolproof, and he is not guaranteed to come back for the second time. Previously, he has volunteered to go on the Starkiller base and face his fears. Now he is choosing to go back to what he was running from. He is being fearless, which is a common quality in a hero.
Finn does not only run into what he fears most, but he also prepares to sacrifice himself on Crate. The First Order battering ram is almost charged enough to open the door to the mine that the Resistance is hiding in. Finn attempts to fly into the battering ram to hopefully disable it. Although Rose ultimately stops him from sacrificing himself, it is not a decision he would have previously made.
Finn went through a drastic change in his journey throughout the galaxy. At first, he was running from the First Order and eventually tried to sacrifice himself to save the Resistance. His change is due to the friendships he gains along the way and learning what hope is.
All right, everyone, that is all for our segment. Thank you guys for listening. Now I'm going to hand it off to the next group.
Hi, this is Angelina from Coffee with Kenobi, and today I am joined by your co-hosts,
Grace, Sydney, Abby, and Caitlin.
Our topic for today's show is Kylo Ren's motivation.
Kylo's motivation has us asking questions like, why follow Vader when he turned good? How does Rey affect his decision? What is he fighting for? And why couldn't he kill Leia when he had already murdered one parent?
In The Force Awakens, it becomes clear that Kylo is attempting to follow in Darth Vader's footsteps. However, is he aware that Vader became good in Return of the Jedi? It does make sense that he would idolize Vader, due to the fact that they are from the same Skywalker bloodline.
Well, director J.J. Abrams answers this question by stating in an interview with IGN, an American entertainment media company, and I quote, Kylo Ren idolizes Darth Vader, not Anakin Skywalker. He idolizes what Vader represents and what Vader was trying to do. The idea is that Ren wants to complete the things that Vader started.
Which is truly fascinating that Kylo sees Vader and Anakin as completely separate individuals and chooses to follow Vader, and while ignoring Anakin. Kylo Ren is choosing to be ignorant toward the light side of the Force to help justify his behavior and his interpretation of his grandfather, Darth Vader.
One thing that we can ask is, what is Kylo Ren fighting for? I think that throughout the movies, Kylo is constantly trying to prove himself the more powerful villain that he claims to be. We see this more when he kills Snoke, making him appear more powerful than and able to deceive his own mentor.
Furthermore, we can say that his reasoning for fighting is driven by his obsession with completely cutting himself off from his past and being Ben Solo. The idea that he can continue on this path with the dark side without any influence from the light, which is what prompts him to murder his father because of his inner conflict of good and evil. Since he views the light side of the Force as weak, he fears he will fall into it, and that fear drives his anger and motivation for evil.
His reasoning for rebelling specifically against his parents, Han Solo and Princess Leia, is a sense of rejection that he feels from them. He believes they care more about the Resistance than they care about him, and he may have even felt unimportant in their eyes compared to the significance of the Resistance.
Although we do see that Kylo shows some sort of bond with Leia that we didn't see with Han. In The Last Jedi, there was a moment when Kylo Ren had the chance to kill his mother, but he didn't. The difference between Han and Leia is that Han does not have the Force while Leia does. In the moment where an opportunity arrives when he can kill her, they are able to sense each other through with the Force, which creates a more intimate connection and causing him to hesitate and eventually pushes him towards deciding not to murder his mother in this moment.
In regards to motivation with Rey, it is obvious that she angers Kylo at first because she is able to resist his influence through the Force. However, that quickly changes when he realizes he can use her to his benefit by getting her to turn to the dark side. She becomes more and more important to him as his craving for this future grows.
It is once he and Rey connect through the Force and are able to touch hands in The Last Jedi, he sees a potential future for her on the dark side of the Force, and because of his obsession with murdering the past, he plans to use it to create a new order with himself and Rey leading the galaxy together, combining their powers. Her power drives him toward his idea of a better empire or a First Order.
Overall, Kylo Ren has many different ways that he shows his motivation for his actions. Things like the influence of his grandfather Darth Vader, Rey's power and raw potential with the Force, affecting his decisions throughout the movies, and his overall reasons for fighting his parents, the Resistance, and the light side of the Force.
Thank you to everyone for joining us for our mythology segment. We will now turn the microphone over to the next group.
Hi, this is Cody from Coffee with Kenobi, and today I'm joined by your co-hosts, Eunice, Olivia, and Gabe. Our topic for today's show is Balance of the Force. We each came up with some questions on The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens to further discuss this topic.
The first topic I would like to discuss is how the Force is used for good and how it's used for evil. I think that the dark side uses the Force to manipulate people and hurt them, like how Snoke choked Rey, and the light side uses it to feel what's going on around them and help people, like how Rey lifted the rocks to save the Resistance.
Kylo Ren tries to get into Rey's head and attempts to manipulate her to tell her where the missing piece to Luke's map is. He uses it to find her weak spot in her head and use it against her. In addition, Rey uses the Force to save Poe and the Resistance by moving the rocks to help them escape from the cave where the First Order is attacking them.
In my opinion, Rey wears white, so I think that she's typically a symbol of the light side of the Force, while Kylo Ren is the opposite. Kylo Ren uses the Force to manipulate and hurt people, while Rey uses it to save people like she did when she moved the rocks to free the Resistance.
When it comes to using the Force, the Sith use the Force to control people. They also bend it to their will. But the Jedi commit themselves to serving the Force and fully understanding it. The Jedi never use the Force to harm or to kill people, unlike the Sith.
The next topic we would like to discuss is how does light always defeat evil if there's supposed to be a balance? I think this is because the writers want to have balance in the Force, but they also want to have an inspiring theme to encourage their audience, which is why they always have light win over darkness.
This imaginary balance isn't what one would think. It is not an even balance. The balance favors the light more than it favors evil, but there has to be evil for light to take a stance. Without evil, the Resistance nor the First Order would exist.
Everyone thinks that there is a balance in the Force, but the only way for there to be balance is if the Resistance wins the war. Because if the First Order has full control of the Force, then they will tear everything apart.
Light never truly defeats the dark. One side has a certain time set for them to rule, but eventually are taken down and destroyed. One can't exist without the other rising up to meet it, kind of like what Snoke told Kylo Ren in his chamber.
Furthermore, what would happen if one side defeated the other one? I think that if evil defeated good, bad things would occur and there would be no peace in the galaxy. But I also feel like if good defeated evil, everything would be too perfect. In that aspect, people wouldn't be able to learn from failure and mistake. For instance, if Luke wouldn't have learned from Kylo, he wouldn't have been able to train Rey and teach her the ways of the Force.
I don't think we can really know what would happen for sure if one side took over the other, because there's so many possibilities for this outcome, and it just depends on the situation. But in order for light to shine, there has to be darkness, so I'm not really sure what would happen if this were to occur.
If one side defeated the other, the galaxy will be thrown into chaos. One side having all the power will never result in peace. There needs to be a certain kind of balance between the two for there to truly be peace in the galaxy.
I think that there will only be balance if the Resistance wins, because they only want to help people. Also, I feel like they would have to use the Force only if there's evil, and would use it in cases of emergencies. However, if the First Order wins, they would take over everything and destroy civilizations across the galaxy.
Our next question is, how does Rey balance both good and evil within her? I think that maybe that's why Luke trained her to begin with, because he saw the balance inside of her and knowing that she could control it. Luke wants her to be a balance, and then he finds Rey, and she's able to balance both sides inside of herself, so she is not a Jedi, and she's not a Sith, she's just a very powerful Force user.
I like to think about more of the symbolic side of things. So Rey kind of symbolizes the balance of the Force because she has both light and dark sides within herself. When Luke was teaching her about the Force, he asked her what she saw when she was closing her eyes, and she said that she saw something like peace and also destruction, but she saw light and also darkness at the same time.
Rey was abandoned as a child, so within her she has mixed feelings. She has both good and bad in her, but morally she knows she has to be good and use the Force for that purpose. But in both Star Wars, The Force Awakens, and The Last Jedi, we see that her weakness is trying to find her parents, and we see that when Kylo's trying to manipulate her, he uses that to make her fall. She has a battle within her that she is trying to fight.
I think that she was curious about what was in the hole when she was using the Force, and when she saw herself, she realized that it was just cold and misleading. Snoke told her that she had amazing raw power, meaning that she was always had this power, and she just now learning about it due to the recent events.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening. On to the next group. May the Force be with you.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are the podcast you're looking for. This is...
How about that? Another wonderful mythology podcast final is in the books. I am so thrilled to share this with you on Coffee with Kenobi. We will be back in just a couple of days to share with you my 6th hour mythology students and the hard work they did for their mythology podcast final. Until next time, everybody, I hope you're having a wonderful Christmas season. We'll be back very, very soon. Go see The Rise of Skywalker. And thank you so much for all that you do to make the Star Wars community the place that it is. Now let's switch gears and go to the normal outro. See you next time. Remember to listen to new and archive shows of Coffee with Kenobi wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, CastBox, Deezer, and our website, www.coffeewithkenobi.com, or wherever you enjoy listening to your favorite shows. And if you listen to the show through iTunes, please leave us a review. You can also find us on social media. In fact, please follow us on Twitter and Instagram, give us a like on Facebook, and check us out on Pinterest. Be sure to listen to our CWK family of shows too, including Legends Library, Resistance Reactions, Comics with Kenobi, and Lattes with Leia. Please leave a review for each of their shows as well, and be sure to subscribe to each of them individually on their own respective feeds. In addition to the places I just mentioned for Coffee with Kenobi, you can find me twice a month on the podcast Looking at Lucasfilm, part of the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, as well as on Twitter at Mr. Zer, MRZEHR, and you can find my writing on CWK's website as well as StarWars.com and IGN. Don't forget to check out www.patreon.com/coffeewithkenobi to support our podcast and help us keep the lights on in the studios. Our Patreon page is where you can listen to our exclusive weekly podcast, CWK Pour-Over, hosted by me, CWK newsman Tom Gross, and Coffee with Kenobi co-founder Corey Club for just $5 a month. There are also opportunities for behind-the-scenes videos, photos, t-shirts, and more. Plus, 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to St. Jude Children's Hospital each month. Thank you to all of you currently supporting us on Patreon, and thank you for considering becoming a member of our Coffee with Kenobi Patreon family.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here.